Welcome back to part 2. It makes you feel much better about life. Journaling to support addiction recovery, implications for child welfare. My name is Amy Krensman. I'm an associate professor of social work at the University of Minnesota, and I'm presenting with Bonnie Horgos, who is a doctoral student in our program. In the first module, we defined journaling, we gave some background research, and I introduced you to positive recovery journaling. Now in part 2, I'm going to be presenting 2 research studies I conducted on positive recovery journaling. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to start with an overview of the 2 studies compared side by side. The first study is what we call a single group study. This means there was no control group. All of the people in the study learned positive recovery journaling. And these were 15 women in residential substance use disorder treatment. This study was conducted in 2019. All study activities took place in person. Again, the setting was a residential treatment center for addiction. This center served women only, so there were only women in this study. And the purpose of this study was to find out if positive recovery journaling was feasible, that is, that the people were able to do it, and was it acceptable? That is, did the people like doing it? I also was able to look at the association between positive recovery journaling and change in well-being outcomes over the course of the study. The second study I conducted was a randomized control trial. This study design meant that when I recruited someone, we would randomize them into whether they learned the journaling or whether they completed brief daily check-ins about their recovery. This study had 81 people in it. It was conducted in 2020 to 2021. It took place remotely because of the COVID pandemic. The sites from which I recruited was 1 residential site and 2 intensive outpatient sites, and individuals of all gender identities were welcome to participate. And in this study, we were really able to examine the impact of positive recovery journaling versus the control group on change in well-being outcomes. Sample characteristics for both studies. Again, in the single group study, all were female. In the randomized experiment, 53% identified as female. In terms of age, the 2 studies pretty much had the same average, roughly the same average age. In terms of the percentage of individuals who had a household income last year that was less than $15,000, the single group study, that was about 73% of participants, and in the randomized experiment, it was about 63% of participants. In terms of years of education, the average years of education for both studies were about the same. In terms of length of sobriety in days, on the day that we met them and did the baseline assessment, this is where there's some interesting differences that are going to make a lot of impact later as we talk about this. In the single group study, the women had on average 48 days of sobriety at baseline when we met them. In the randomized experiment, the people in the study had an average of 140 days of sobriety when we met them. So they were further along in their recovery journey. In terms of number of addiction treatment episodes, for both groups, the average was 6. In terms of race and ethnic breakdown for the 2 groups, these breakdowns represent the proportions of race and ethnicity of the host settings. Now I'll go on to give you the results of our first study, which is the within persons or the single group study, where we looked at feasibility and acceptability. This study was recently published in the Journal of Positive Psychology. These modules have a link to further reading where you can find the citation and link to more information about this article. This image shows the design of this first study. All the way to the left, in an introductory meeting, we met the individuals, we screened them to make sure they were eligible for the study, We performed informed consent so that they knew all about the study and had the ability to join us or not as they wished. And if they decided to join us, they completed a baseline questionnaire. Then they met with me 2 or 3 times a week at their treatment facility for 8 sessions in which I taught them positive recovery journaling. So we started out with a group phase that ran from about 2.5 to 4 weeks, depending on snow days and other things that happened. They learned the journaling in a group, and then they journaled on their own independently for 2 more weeks. And then there was a final survey that they took and an exit interview. The exit interview was where the individual in the research study sat with a research assistant and talked about their experiences being in the study. Results. In terms of feasibility and acceptability, after each occasion when someone completed a positive recovery journaling entry, we asked them, to what degree was this entry today that you just completed? To what degree was it easy, difficult, satisfying, pleasant, helpful, and how much effort did you put in today to your journaling? And as you can see from these results, people found it relatively easy, not very difficult, and relatively satisfying, pleasant, helpful, and they put in a fair amount of effort. And now for some more quantitative results. These results focus in on significant increases in well-being outcomes from baseline to the exit interview. So when we look at our study design, we're interested in change from baseline when we first met them all the way to the final exit interview at the far right-hand side of the study. What we found for this first study is that we found positive change, that is improvement in all of the factors that you see in red ink. That is, satisfaction with life improved, well-being improved, reward from the environment improved, feeling happy with recovery improved, feeling confident staying sober improved, and there was a decrease in depression. We also found a trend in a decrease in craving for drugs and alcohol and a decrease in feelings of demoralization. So while they were learning the journaling, while they were practicing the journaling, these positive changes were going on. But we don't know whether the journaling caused these changes because we did not have a control group. We don't know if these positive changes would have taken place even without the journaling as a result of these women just getting healthier over time and all of the good benefits they were getting from their residential treatment facility. But at least it shows that the journaling co-occurred with positive change, and at least people weren't getting worse when they were doing the journaling. So we took this as a sign of encouragement. Next, some qualitative results. We found from the exit interviews that positive recovery journaling emphasized what was positive about life in recovery. People told us that they noticed that more good things than bad things were happening. What people ended up doing is they looked at their good things that happened list and their bad things that happened list, and they were surprised to find written there in their own hand that their good things list was longer than their bad things list. They were surprised. They fully came to this expecting that their bad things list would be longer than their good things list. And when they saw the reverse, it gave them a lot of optimism and encouragement. People also told us that they noticed there was more to be grateful for than they realized. And they also told us that their bad things list started to appear less threatening in the context of all this other good stuff. In terms of the right-hand side of the page, we found that positive recovery journaling helped participants to accomplish daily goals. The women told us, very nearly all of the women told us that they have trouble remembering things that they want to do. They told us, I have a bad memory. They told us that the usual way they try to remember to get important things done is, as you see on the quote on the left, I'd write things I need to do on Post-it notes and lose them in my drawer. My top drawer is so messy, but I just throw everything in there. In other words, they didn't have a system for a basic planner, a basic way to write things down to help them remember to do things. It seemed to us that the women thought that they should just be able to rely on memory in order to remember to get important things done. And they used positive recovery journaling as a simple planner to help them remember important things that they wanted to get done. A person said, "I remembered so many things that I've been forgetting for months, literally." And the women told us that when they wrote it down, they remembered. And when they remembered, they got it done. And when they got it done, they felt great about themselves. Participants offered a number of critiques about positive recovery journaling as well. Some complained that it was repetitive day by day, and that might partly be because life in residential treatment was somewhat restricted in terms of the range of possible activities in a day. Many told us they're not yet ready to repair or make amends. As you might have noticed on the right-hand side, there's a repair or an amends category. Some stated that on some days there were obstacles to completing positive recovery journaling. They were too busy or they forgot, and when they forgot, they felt bad about forgetting. One person expressed a desire to write more in depth, and another person mentioned that part of her journal, a fold-out flap that we had, began to tear as a result of frequent use. Next, we'll talk about the results of the second study, the randomized control study. Here is the design of the second study. You'll see how it built on the first study. In the introductory meeting, we met the participant just like before. We screened them to make sure they were eligible. We provided informed consent. They did a baseline questionnaire, and then we randomized them into what we called the gold group and the maroon group, using the University of Minnesota school colors. The maroon group was also what we called the treatment group. They were in the journaling now group, and they right away, once they randomized into the maroon group, we mail them a journal. Don't forget, this was during COVID. So we put a journal immediately in the mail to them, and they started to attend the 8-session journaling group with me. And this time it took place on Zoom. After about 2.5 weeks of attending 8 group sessions with me, they journaled on their own for 2 weeks. Then they filled out a final questionnaire and had an exit interview. And then 1 month later, we did a follow-up interview with them. If they were randomized into the gold group, then they filled out electronic questionnaires 4 to 7 times a week during phase 1. During phase 2, they continued to fill out electronic questionnaires daily. And then finally, they also had an exit interview. It was then the 1-month follow-up interview with us. And then the gold group would get the journal mailed to them with written instructions for how to use it. Now we're able to compare feasibility and acceptability between the treatment and the control group. And again, after each day's study activities, after the treatment group did the journaling, or after the control group filled out their questionnaires, we asked them, to what extent did you find today's study activity to be easy, difficult, satisfying, pleasant, and helpful? And how much effort did you put into today's activity? So starting from the left, working to the right, and these are averages across time, the treatment group put forth a little more effort and we asked a lot more work from them, so that made sense. Both groups found their tasks to be similarly easy, similarly difficult. However, the treatment group found their activity to be more satisfying, pleasant, and helpful than the control group found their activity to be. And those differences were statistically significant. More about the impact of positive recovery journaling. And here what I'm going to talk about is change in well-being from the introductory meeting through to the exit interview. So that's the part I'm going to present today. We only saw some small indications of improvement in well-being in terms of decreases in negative affect and increases in the feeling that life is better now in recovery than it was in active addiction. And these were determined not by statistical significance. There was no statistical significance between the treatment and the control group. We're still analyzing these data, but this is what we're finding now. However, looking at an effect size of at least 0.3, that is a small to medium difference between the treatment and the control group, we have a signal here that the people who did the journaling had less negative affect than the control group, and they felt more strongly that life is better now in recovery than it was in active addiction. But we didn't see any differences from all these other well-being factors. So we asked ourselves why. We asked ourselves why we didn't see more of an effect of the journaling. We felt that doing positive recovery journaling would definitely result in participants doing more of what we called positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors. So let me explain what those are, because they're going to be talked about in the next couple of slides. Positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors include a composite scale ranging from 0 to 24, made up of these 6 items. The first 3 items relate to the left-hand side of the page. In the past 24 hours, I stopped to think over the past day. And people would answer definitely no, leaning toward no, unsure, leaning toward yes, and definitely yes. So if they did positive recovery journaling, then they definitely would have stopped to think over the past day, and they most definitely would put down definitely yes. The second item is, in the past 24 hours, I wrote a list of things I'm grateful or thankful for. So if they did the journaling, they should answer definitely yes. In the past 24 hours, I thought of people in need, and in my mind, I sent them good wishes. Again, if they had done the journaling, the answer most certainly would have been definitely yes for the treatment group. The next 3 items relate to the right-hand side of the page of positive recovery journaling. In the past 24 hours, I made a list of at least one thing I wanted to do that I'd find pleasurable. You might remember the joy category. In the last 24 hours, I wrote down the things I wanted to get done in the near future. In the past 24 hours, I directly wished someone well in person or by phone, text, or internet. We added up the scores to all 6 items so that it became a composite variable that ranged from 0 to 24. And we asked these same questions of the control group. In general, what we found is that positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors, that set of 6 items from the previous slide, had a positive or favorable correlation with a lot of the well-being indicators we were interested in. Let's start over here with the strongest association. Each one of these dots is one of our study participants, and these are treatment and control combined at baseline. What you would see is that the dots would align kind of on a line that goes from the lower left to the upper right, indicating a positive correlation. That means that the extent to which they did positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors on the day before was associated with present moment feelings of flourishing. It was associated in a positive correlation with gratitude. It was associated significantly with a decrease in depression. It was associated positively with feeling happy about recovery. It was associated positively in commitment to sobriety. It was associated positively in subjective well-being. It was associated positively with feelings of serenity, that is, feeling at peace and at ease. And it was associated positively with feelings of positive affect. So all of the indicators that have a red box around them are where there was a significant correlation between positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors, and these other factors that we felt were important to recovery. Let me orient you to this slide. On the x-axis, going left and right, you have time in days during the duration of the study. On the up and down axis, the y-axis, we have positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors ranging from 0 to 24, the full range of that composite scale. The red line are people in the treatment group, people who were learning and doing the journaling. The blue line are people in the control group. They did the daily check-ins. Now, what you'll notice is that the people in the journaling group did far more of these behaviors. But people in the control group still did a large number of these behaviors. Notice that their average is around 15. We don't see that blue line scraping along the bottom of this data graphic. It shows that many in the control group were engaging with positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors. And what this means is this could describe why we didn't see more of a treatment effect between treatment and control, because the control group was already doing some of these behaviors that the journaling was designed to enhance. Now, why was the control group doing many positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors? Well, one, the control group told us in the exit interviews that they found the daily surveys they were filling out to be supportive of recovery. And we also have evidence from the qualitative data that when they filled out those daily questionnaires, it did in fact change their behavior. From the qualitative data, we also found that other recovery activities also encouraged positive recovery journaling, cognitions, and behaviors, such as mutual aid meetings, host treatment center recommendations, and a couple of participants in the control group mentioned to us that they have a daily prayer practice where they would wish others well and say prayers for others, and they would recount things they were grateful for. This concludes the second part of this module. Please join us for part 3, where we're going to talk about implications for child welfare, and we have a bonus segment for you on how gratitude supports addiction recovery. And finally, we're going to conclude with an invitation for you to be involved in the next phase of our work. Thank you so much for joining us.